Here are 6 things we wish we knew when we set up our first home recording studios. So whether you're starting out from scratch and you're just getting started on your recording journey, you're building your first studio yourself, or maybe you want to upgrade things, this is for you. We're going to share these 6 things. We're going to do 3 each. Maybe there's some overlap, maybe not, but definitely the goal is for you to learn from that and hopefully not make the same mistakes. I wish I knew those things when I started out. No one told me. So here we are, helping you avoid the same mistakes and running into the same problems. My name is Benedict Hein. I'm a mixing engineer. I am working out of my studio called Outback Recordings here in Germany. We mix a lot of songs every year, and we also run this coaching platform, the Self-Recording Band, where we work with artists directly who self-record, do it all in their home studios, and we help them get great results doing that. We do that through our coaching and through this free podcast and video that you are watching or listening to right now. We are at episode number 307, which is kind of crazy to me to think about. So if you are a returning listener and you've listened to all of those 306 previous episodes, first of all, congrats. Hats off to you for doing that. Secondly, thanks for coming back. We really appreciate you. And I know that there are some people who have listened to every single one of these episodes. And if you're new and you're just discovering this, there's a whole backlog of things that you can go through. We've been doing this for a couple of years, and it's a lot of fun. I'm doing this not by myself, though. I'm here joined by my friend and co-host, phenomenal producer from Spain, Manel Espinosa Berenguer. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hello, Benny. And just in case you don't know me, my name is Manel Espinosa Berenguer, and I'm a mixing engineer and music producer from Spain, always ready to turn your demos into finished songs through a lovely process. Yeah.
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 Yeah. When did you add the yeah at the end? I think you've been doing that for a while now. That's
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so. I
Oh.
didn't hear for the first time. Yeah. Good. All right. So, how long ago was it, Manel, that you started, you did your very first recording? When was that actually?
When I was like 15 or 16 years old, I remember my dad bought this 2010, I think it was, or 2008, I'm not sure, MacBook Pro. And I bought a Cakewalk audio thing.
Software?
Yeah. And I started playing with GarageBand and later on Logic in the basement. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So that has been 15, 16 years ago, maybe more than that.
Maybe. But what about you? Like, how did you start?
So my first thing that I've recorded, let me think. So the very first thing was a portable 8-track recorder, a digital Boss, I think it was, recorder that had a built-in CD burner. It was not one of those tape things, the tape recorders, but it was actually digital and CD. And you could have 8 tracks. You could have some very basic editing on a tiny screen and a couple of, effects like EQ compression, stuff like that. So I did my very first demos with that. And then, shortly before that, the very first thing I recorded was an old PC with a copy of Mixcraft. I don't know if we definitely didn't buy it, so I don't know if it was free at the time or we just had a cracked version or something I don't know. It was Mixcraft, and then what we did was we had a small analog mixer in our jam space that we would use for vocals mainly, and then we would just plug in a couple of drum mics and our guitar, mics in front of the amps, and then vocals into this mixer. We summed it all together, and then we recorded the stereo output of the mixer by plugging it into the little 3.5. The line input of the computer. So with no interface at all. It was just, it had a headphone output and a line input. And into the little green line input of the PC, that's where we put, we used a Y cable, so 2 outputs of our mixer, and then into that one thing, and then into the line in of the PC, and then we recorded it all on one track. That was the very first recording. And then after that, I got the Boss digital 8-track recorder. And then that was only after that I discovered that you could actually record individual tracks to a DAW, and that there was interfaces with multiple channels and stuff. I didn't know that in the beginning, and so at some point I got that my first kind of real setup was a PreSonus 8-channel Fire Studio. It was called a FireWire interface into an old iMac. and an older version of Logic. Yeah, that was the first thing. And it was, how long ago was that? 21 years, I think, was the Mixcraft thing. That was 21 years. No, more than that, 22 years ago. Or 23 even. I was 15, I think, 15, 16. So that like just 23 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That was the journey. Yeah, but I'm talking about when I started for real. When I started working on a first kind of real record, or I took it more seriously. I built my first kind of home studio in a jam, or it was in a jam space actually back then. When I took it seriously and started to get some gear and knew that I wanted to make a somewhat proper record. That's what I want to talk about today. Like decisions I made back then that I would have done, that I would do different now, or that I wish I knew at the time when I was setting it up. So we're talking like, maybe 20 years ago, not like 23 years ago, something like that. Yeah. Okay, cool. So start, Manel. Give us the first one, because I think that, I don't know which one you're going to start with, but one is really interesting that I didn't even have on my list. So what is the first thing you wish you knew when you started?
Yeah, the first one is to buy good cables. Because, bad cables make a lot of noise and bring you a lot of problems. I guess they can even, it's pretty obvious, but they can also affect the tone of whatever you're playing, if it's a guitar or whatever. And I didn't know that. And at the beginning, you tend to buy the cheapest things. So I think investing in good cables is a very good thing, and especially because good cables are not super expensive. It's not like you have to spend 1,000 euros per cable. It's a bit more, of course, but especially, and not only buying good cables, but once you buy good cables, then you have to treat them well.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, those cables can last for years and years. So yeah, that would be my first take.
Okay, interesting. I didn't have that on my list, but you're absolutely right. I bought cables a lot of times, like multiple times, or I had to fix them. You can obviously fix them yourself, solder them, and like all kinds of things. But I've definitely spent too much time soldering and fixing and buying new cables. And if I had just bought good ones from the beginning, I would have actually saved money in the long run, and also a lot of headache, because I had a lot of situations where a cable broke mid-session. I didn't realize, and then, later I discovered, every single floor tom hit sounds like crap because there was a back cable on that thing and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, like I have cables, especially the ones for that I use on my guitars, the jack cables.
Yep.
Some of them have 10 years easy. Yep. And they still work
absolutely
super well. So
yeah. Yep, totally. That's a good one. Okay, easy but good. So my first point here on the list would be I would buy less but better gear. So one mistake that I made was that I thought I wanted to have. I saw the pictures and of like studios, and I read what people were using, and when I started, the in the box stuff wasn't as good yet, and you could already make stuff that sounds good in the box, but analog was still very, very important, and. And you could argue that it still is today. It's totally subjective at this point. But I thought I needed to have racks of like outboard gear and compressors and EQs to impress potential clients, or to just make my stuff sound better, whatever. And so while I do think it's a good idea to get some sort of experience with some analog gear at some point, just because it teaches you signal flow, and you learn to commit things on the way in, and you don't save all the decisions for later. So I think there's a benefit in having a couple of analog things. It's not necessary, and there's a lot of things you should do before you buy analog gear. It's the very bottom of the list in terms of priority, but still, I think it can be a good idea. But the way I did it was the wrong way, and I wish I knew that. So I bought, because I didn't have budget, I bought a lot of inexpensive stuff instead of just 2 or 3 really good pieces. So I had a rack full of like very cheap entry-level compressors, the typical, like, I don't really want to name names, but if you go to your preferred online music dealer and you go to compressors and you sort for the cheapest, that's what I got basically. And so I had a couple of these compressors. I had even things like a hardware de-esser and all kinds of processes that I thought I needed. And then I had a cheap analog desk because I thought I could EQ with that thing on the way in. And what I should have done is, which is what I did later, have one really great signal chain, like a really good mic preamp, one EQ, one compressor into an interface, and then use that on everything, basically. Use that on vocals, use that on your guitar, on your bass, use it on one of the most important drum mics, maybe the overheads or the kick or the snare or something like that. And then if you really want to continue with more gear, build from there and just get good pieces one at a time, but less but better. That's what I should have done. And before you even do that, make sure you got some of the other things down. So before you even think about those types of things, make sure you got, a proper DAW, not just GarageBand. Make sure you have good monitoring, make sure the room works and all of that. But if you're going to buy gear, buy a few really good pieces, use them on everything instead of buying a bunch of mediocre or cheap gear just to have a lot of options, because it won't do any good for you. What I quickly realized is that even back then, the good plugins were better than the bad analog gear. And also, if you're starting out and you don't really know what you're doing yet, you're going to have a lot of like noise floor issues. The gain structure won't be right and a couple other things. There's just nothing to be gained from these. They don't add any color. People think just because it's analog, it's nice, but it's not. It just degrades the signal. It gets worse with every single piece of equipment like that. And so, yeah, just get the digital stuff right first, get the monitoring right first, and then if you go analog and want to use outboard or a good front end, go high quality but less in terms of gear. So I wish I knew that. I thought more is more. I thought a compressor is a compressor, but it's not.
Yeah, I would say like if you don't have the budget to buy like really good analog gear, you can probably buy some sort of controller. It can be very basic so that at least you can physically move things and change parameters digitally, but with something that's physical, because that's at least for me that's useful. And I have a keyboard that probably cost me like 200 euros or something like that, and I can assign some of the knobs to controls on the DAW, and that itself is useful because I know it's a different feeling. You can adjust some things without looking at the numbers or the screens, or yeah.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And then also these days, the situation is much different. Like if you want to commit on the way in, which I absolutely encourage you to do, then you can get something like a small Apollo or some sort of interface with built-in processing that you can commit on the way in, or you can print through plugins as you record. Like in Cubase, you can have input tracks. You can put a plugin on there and record through that, and then it's printed into the recording. It's committed. And like I said, especially these days, good analog emulation plugins are way better than cheap analog gear, and even better than most of the clones of good analog gear. And I've tested so many of those things, and you really got to invest a lot to be able to beat the good plugins these days. So yeah, I didn't know. I wasted a bunch of money, sold it all again, and it was a learning experience, but you don't have to go through the same issues that I had. You now know that it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Cool. So, all right. Next thing on your list, Manel.
Next thing would be, room acoustics / absorbers. Because, I mean, of course, the more you can do, the better. Yeah, as you always say, you cannot go like short on working on your room, right? But just having a couple of good absorbers that you can make yourself without spending a lot of money can make a really big difference when, for example, recording vocals and stuff like that. Of course, if you're going to, to mix or to work with speakers, you probably will need a bit more than that. But if you're starting with headphones, for example, like I did, having a couple of good absorbers that you can place in different places on your room and having a little bit of a notion of how acoustics work, I think that's a game changer. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I completely underestimated that as well. So the room is, especially if you were to start a good like commercial sort of studio, like a really professional studio, absolutely invest in the room first. It's more important than anything else. Just a laptop and a pair of speakers in a good room with nothing else is going to be better than having all the gear and nothing done to the room. So, yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it can be cheap. It can be done yourself. Building absorbers is not that hard. You don't have to spend a lot of money on like pre-made absorbers that might not even be as effective as some of the things you can build yourself. So yeah, absolutely needs to be on the list. And this means like when you started, you also didn't pay much attention to the room. You did that later.
Yeah, I mean, zero attention to the room. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, it was when I met you that I started thinking about those things.
So, okay, well,
thank you, Benedict.
I'm glad you did. All right, cool. Yeah, the next one kind of goes along with that. Like it's a very similar thing that I have on my list, which is the monitoring and headphones side of things. So what I wish I knew was that there's a big difference between different monitor models. So I thought, well, I'm not stupid. I'm not going to spend that much on speakers if there are some available for $100, you know? And so I thought, like, they say studio monitors, so I bet they're just good enough. Turns out they're not. And yes, if you're on a budget and you got to work with what you have, I totally get that. But first of all, there's still, even in the low budget category, there's better ones and not so good ones. And if you can, ask someone who knows what they're doing for a recommendation, or ideally test some of the speakers yourself. But what I would say is, if your options are so like very, very limited and all you have is like a couple $100 or maybe 100 or 200 or something like that, I would start with a good pair of headphones and not get speakers at all in the beginning, and would just start there and then add speakers after a while when you saved up for it, because for like $200 you can get decent headphones that allow you to make really good decisions, but it's going to be really hard to find good speakers, and then you need the speakers and the room to make that work. And otherwise, you'll be flying blind. You won't be able to make good decisions. And it's the one filter that all of your decisions go through. So it doesn't matter what plugins you have, what other stuff you have. The final filter that you're making decisions through is your monitoring. And if that's not accurate, if that is lying to you or not showing you what's going on, you're always going to be, spinning your wheels and not making progress. So I wish I knew that, because I bought the cheapest pair of monitors that was available on my, music dealer site at the time. And I didn't really also pay attention to like good headphone models. I just bought some for recording. So I didn't even think about headphones for mixing or making decisions. I just bought cheap closed headphones for recording and then the cheapest possible monitors. And I thought that's enough. And I couldn't hear shit on those things. Like, I couldn't make good decisions. And I questioned everything else. I thought, it was a plugin that I needed, or I didn't understand EQ or compression or whatever, when in reality, I just couldn't hear things. And yeah, so don't underestimate the monitoring. It is really, really, really important. That plus the room is the biggest thing that will make the biggest difference, that will have the biggest impact on your overall results. So invest there first. I would rather have a cheap microphone and stock plugins and all of that than not having a reliable monitoring situation. And if you're on a very limited budget, like I said, get a good pair of headphones and start there. So the importance of monitoring. Absolutely. And I just didn't know that. I thought, well, it's a studio monitor, so I bet they're good enough.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that we're not talking about spending 20,000 euros on your monitoring from the very beginning. There are options that are really good and not as expensive. So
yes, yeah, absolutely. Good. Okay, and then. Yeah, one thing also that you can also, if you already have that stuff, there might be still things that you can improve about your current setup. This is something we do all the time inside of our coaching program. One of the first things we do with our members is take a look at their monitoring situation, have them put together a reference playlist, listen to those songs, analyze them in certain ways, just learning their monitoring really well, and then seeing if we can improve something about how it's set up, the distance to the speakers, the distance between the speakers, the angle, the height, all of those things, maybe small improvements to the room. And only once we've maxed out what's possible with what they have, then we think about upgrading. But there might be things you can still do to improve things. But for example, if you are like me and you buy speakers that are just way too small, like I bought basically these were like almost like desktop computer speakers that I bought. And like you just can't hear any low end on these. And it's like, it's so limited. But as soon as you get to a point where you have decent full range speakers, big enough full range speakers, then there might be things you can do to improve the situation just by better placement and doing something to the room, and then you can upgrade from there. But again, looking back, the smartest thing to do in my situation would have been to get a good pair of headphones, and then at some point some entry level big enough speakers, and then do put all the rest of it in like room treatment and DIY solutions for that, and then upgrade from there.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Next thing on your list, Manil.
Next thing would be your instrument. And again, I think as it happens with the cables, if you have a really bad guitar with bad electronics, you're gonna get lots of unwanted noise. It's gonna be very difficult to play, like not comfortable to play also, and it's not gonna stay in tune, which probably is the most important thing of all of those that I mentioned. And nowadays, again, you don't have to spend 5,000 euros to get a good guitar. Like most guitars around like 300 or something, they stay in tune. So yeah, and the thing is that once you have the guitar, you have to maintain it in a way so that it's always in a good shape, it's comfortable to play for you, and again stays in tune. So yeah, maintenance is very, very important, and we also have a course or a playbook related to that in the coaching portal. So
Yep, an entire guitar setup course by Diego Casillas, actually a really good guitar tech, walking through this. So absolutely, instruments, even more important than all of the recording equipment. Like it always starts at the source. We have entire episodes on that. Yeah, love that. And so, but does that mean, again, back to the topic of the episode, when you started, did you think the recording equipment was more important than the instruments, or did you not know that it's that important, or what was like the quote unquote mistake or things you would do differently now?
I didn't, like at the beginning, I didn't even know it was important to bring the guitar to a technician like every year or something like that. I didn't even know that it was super important to change the strings that often.
Yeah.
Yeah. The problem for me during the whole process, maybe it was also for you, because I think we had a similar situation in some ways, is that I lived in a place where there were not a lot of professionals and musicians and stuff like that. So, and YouTube was there already, but it wasn't like it is now. So I didn't have that many sources of information for me to like learn those things, and I didn't have any sort of mentor to tell me, hey, you need to change the strengths every time you record, so that yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I don't think I paid as much attention to that as well. It was pretty early on that I noticed that, but definitely not when I was starting out. So yeah, good point. Cool. So the next thing was, I wish I knew what I didn't know at the time. So like you don't know what you don't know, basically. And so what I mean by that is when I was starting out, I didn't know all the things I didn't know, which means I was kind of also not even aware of the fact that I probably don't know a lot of the things. I read so much, I learned so much, I spent so much time studying what other people were doing and all that I thought I had a pretty good understanding of everything, not realizing that there were so many knowledge gaps and so many things that I was missing because I didn't have any experience, and I've never talked to a professional really before who helped me with anything. And so I was not very open to getting external help and stuff like that, because I thought, I read all the stuff all the time anyways, and I know how it technically works, and I just thought it's a matter of practicing. And to a degree, that's correct if you really learn a lot and you practice a lot like I did. But I could have sped up the process so much if I had started collaborating with other people earlier, getting feedback earlier, and just letting professionals tell me what I'm actually missing. And I've told this story before on the podcast. the first time I collaborated with a really professional mix engineer, and he was helping me get better recordings at the source and then giving me feedback on all kinds of things. And then also when I heard what he did to the recordings that I made, that kind of changed everything. That first sort of mentoring experience changed everything, because I knew like, oh God, oh my God, like I know nothing. I need to start from scratch. I need someone like that to walk me through all the things, show me all the things I'm missing. And from there, I made progress a lot faster. This is also why I believe in this whole concept of coaching so much, because I had the same experience myself. And yeah, I just wish I knew what I didn't know at the time, sort of. And yeah. And if you're the type of person who like just likes to learn, educate yourself, and you're spending time on YouTube all day, and every single free time that like every moment of free time you have, you spend practicing and recording things, you start to think that you really know a lot, especially in the beginning of the process. Once you have a certain amount of knowledge acquired, the confidence is really high. And then there's this soon after you realize, how little you know, and then confidence drops all the way to the bottom, and then it's a straight line up again from there. It's what happens with most people. And so don't think just because you're educating yourself all the time and you watched all the YouTube videos and you understand how it technically works and you've read the manuals and all that, if that's you, don't think that this means you know how to make records. Unfortunately, it doesn't. It's not all of it. There's a lot more that goes into it. And it's great if you are that type of person, because not everybody's even willing to do that. So if you're putting in that amount of effort and you're learning all the time, that's cool. But just know that you can significantly speed up things if you talk to people who actually make records all the time, who can listen to your stuff, give you feedback, show you what the missing things are and how to solve them, how to fix them, show you an A/B comparison so you can hear it yourself. And that way you'll learn much, much quicker. And there are countless stories of really talented people who have educated themselves a lot, who have played around with gear and know how it all works, who start working at studios as assistants or whatever, only to realize that they don't know anything as soon as they start working in a room with someone really experienced. And so, yeah, starting over, I would definitely save up money and spend some time spend some time in rooms with experienced people, and just try to be around those people as much as possible, online or in person or whatever. Yeah, that's just invaluable. I would spend much less time in my own bubble thinking I know things already.
So my question is now, how much time did you spend in your own bubble before meeting this important person?
For way too long. So let me think. The first recording ever, like I said, was like 2013 or something. No, not 13. 2003, when I was like 15. 2003, 2004, something like that. I think that's when we made the first demo for our band with like this little mixer into the computer. Then we recorded another EP in 2005 with a friend of ours who did it for us. So I learned a little bit, but also he was not a professional at all. I learned a couple of things, but he was also just trying to figure it out on his own, basically. And then in 2007, I got my first sort of, I thought like I want to do it for real, and I bought my first setup and stuff like 2007, 2008-ish. And then in 2012 was that experience that I just talked about, 2011, 2012. So I think the first 2 years of like just playing around with it, I don't really count that. I think that's really normal. But after that, it's been 4 or 5 years in my own bubble before having that sort of experience. And I could have gotten to the same results. Like what I'm saying is the progress I made between 2011 and 2014 or so, in this like 3-year time period, or even like from 2011 to 2013, the progress I made there in those 2 years was way bigger than the progress I'd made from 2003 to 2011. So it's like I could have compressed 5-6 years into 2, basically.
No.
Yeah. That's what happened. And then from there, like it just skyrocketed, basically, because I never stopped. Like after that experience, that's not where I stopped. I just tried collaborating with people as much as I could. I hired mastering engineers to give me feedback on my mixes. There wasn't any such thing as coaching at the time. At least I didn't know of any, and I still don't know of any program other than ours that does it that way. But I just paid to be in studios and, I would pay people to do a studio tour with me, and then I spend an afternoon there, and I let them explain everything they do in their setups and all that. Or I would hire a mastering engineer so I could get mix feedback, or I would hire a mix engineer to get recording feedback, or I would pay people for their time and do one-off sessions and just ask them questions as much as I could, like all those things. I just kept doing that, and then I flew to the US to attend like seminars and weekends with producers, and like I did all the things I could and could get my hands on. I saved up money for that, and we have a full episode where I talk about how much I spent over the years on that as well. But that just sped up everything significantly. And then by 2014, 15, when I moved, 2013, I moved into this studio that I'm still in right now. And then 2014, 15, this was when things really started to take off. And yeah, I could have compressed 5-6 years into 2 had I done that earlier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's the curse of, there are some people who don't put in a lot of effort, and so they know that they don't know enough, and they are like have realistic expectations because they know like, well, I don't do it a lot, so of course I don't know anything. The danger is if you do it all the time, like I didn't do anything else. I never had a day job in my life. I was just touring with my band, going to school at the same time, and then doing audio. I never did anything else. And so if you spend all day, every day, learning about music production, learning the gear, practicing and all of that, then it's easy to think that you know everything, or you are about to know everything, and you can do it all yourself. If I had like limited time and I could only put in time on the weekends or some evenings, I would have had more realistic expectations, because then I would be like, yeah, of course I don't know it, I don't do it enough. But if you spend all day every day for a couple of years, you tend to think that you must be good because you spent all the time. But without feedback, if you're doing it in a vacuum, it's not the same.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm interested in hearing the bonus mystery thing on our list here, Manel. What is that?
Yeah, the bonus mystery thing is that actually I think there are other things that are more important than even you getting into your studio and recording your music, which is that your music needs to be good, your songs need to be good, and your craft need to be good. But the point that I have here is that I don't think those two things, like the studio and your more like musical part, those two things are not separate. Like, I'm not telling you that you only have to work on your music and forget about the studio, because actually having your studio makes you a better performer and a better musician. But you also have to be like critical enough with yourself to think that you have to improve your skills, your musical skills, your songwriting skills and all that. Because in my case, like when I started to toy with my laptop, that's when I learned how to play in time and how to play with a click and how to play, like how to record vocals and how to make different vocal layers and backing vocals and all that. So the point is, I think there are things that are more important than the studio itself, which is your craft and your songs, your lyrics you need to have something to say and tell. But at the same time, like making your own studio, buying some gear, working on your DAW can make you better at those other things that need to be in place.
Agreed. I think I have, in my whole band at the time, we have gotten a lot better at our instruments. Like, we just became better musicians because we started to record ourselves, because for the first time we could hear everything really properly and we could compare it to what we liked on other records, and slowly but surely we realized how bad we were in terms of timing and the song arrangements and all that kind of stuff. And so without going down the recording rabbit hole, I think we wouldn't have been aware of the things we really need to work on, which is the actual music. So I think that's right. Yeah. And also, I agree. This is also one of the things that I wish I knew when I started, is the importance of timing, tuning, intonation, and how bad we really were at this. I first of all, I had a hard time hearing these things. I remember listening to some of my stuff and thinking it was totally okay, and now when I listen back, I'm like, how did I not hear this? Like, this is out of tune, out of time, whatever. And I always had pretty good ears, and I've been, playing piano all my life and have like classical music training and all that, and still I wasn't able to really spot those things. So yeah, I wish I knew more about that side too and how important it is. And I really thought, again, like how unrealistic our expectations and our, like, how, I don't know. It's funny to think how like we thought we're really good when in reality we just completely sucked compared to our favorite bands. And it's so embarrassing and funny to think that like we really thought in the jam space, when we recorded, we're like, yeah, if we only need to record this properly and then it would sound great, not realizing how far away we were from the level of musicianship that those bands were at and stuff. We completely overestimated our abilities.
Yeah. Like yesterday, actually, I was listening to an now old record that I love, which is album by Avenged Sevenfold called Avenged Sevenfold. And I remember at that time I was listening to that music and I thought I could make something similar.
Damn. Yeah, that is
crazy good. Like, and not only the musicianship in terms of like crazy drums and guitars and solos, but the melodies, the compositions are so great that it's funny that I thought I could do something similar to that.
Yeah, but it's everyone pretty much. It's very rare that I get to talk to a musician in the early phases of the self-recording journey, sort of, who has a really great, perspective on their own abilities and all that. And most people completely overestimate what they can do. And I'm not judging because I was the same. It's most people. Yeah. And I was just looking up a comment that I just got on one of the ads we were running for the coaching, and someone said, so in this ad, I just showed a record of one of my bands, and I talked about how good it feels to have an actual record, like a vinyl record in your hands, that you made, and that sounds awesome, and that we got a record label to even pay for the manufacturing and all that. And I showed two examples, one from 2013, which was our, record back then that got us signed and all that, and then a current one of my current band. And then one comment was saying, it's hard. So many independent artists out there with killer songs and lyrics but never get heard because their vocals or musicianship is not great. Or maybe they have a ton of songs but nothing catchy or interesting. And getting airplay is almost impossible until you walk into a radio station and hold a gun at them at some point until they play your stuff. And I was like, I read that and I was like, yeah, it's hard. It's like, and of course you need good songs, you need to be good musicians. Like I get where this is coming from, but also just assuming that you can be successful or be played on the radio or whatever if you are either a bad musician or you don't have interesting songs. That's just, yeah, I mean, it's not going to work. It's like, of course you need to be good at playing music and you need to have good songs. And without those things, the rest of it is irrelevant, basically. And yes, if you don't have those things, it's going to be hard, if not impossible. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah, unfortunately, or I mean, not even unfortunately. I think it's like that. Like there's only so much music we can consume, and there's already so much bad stuff and mediocre stuff out there. And of course, you got to be good if you want to stand out. It's it is what it is. All right, so to sum it up, 6 things: cables, absorbers, acoustics, room in general, your instrument, being a good musician, having good songs. This was the bonus thing. Yeah. And then the other 3 were less but better gear, importance of monitoring, and starting with headphones, and like if it has to be either or, start with headphones, but definitely the importance of monitoring in general. And then the performances, the I don't know what I don't know kind of things. Just being open for feedback, getting help earlier in the process, and not thinking you can do everything on your own in a vacuum. Those are the things. If we knew all of these things back then, we would have made faster progress for sure. And so maybe this helps you not do the same things. Whether you believe us or not, up to you. But we have a proven track record that shows that it works. And once we started doing these things, things got better for sure. So, yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Any closing thoughts on this, Manel?
Well, my closing thoughts are that the fact, we were talking about the fact that lots of artists cannot really see their level at the beginning, or they overestimate it. They think, they think they sound as good as their references, right? And I think that's why it's important that if you can, you work with a producer from the very beginning, because the producer normally tends to be someone who has that experience and someone who can tell you what really is your music, and that can also help you a lot to improve if you're open. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's one of two things you can do right now. Or there's three things. First of all, implement the things that we mentioned in this episode and try doing all of them and not wasting time, not wasting money. If you're just building your studio, pay attention to monitoring and acoustics, like we said. Get good instruments, cables, the basics, really, like we said. And then the two things from there that you can do is either hire a producer or a mixer for the experience and for the learning and for the feedback, and just going through that process at least once and seeing what it's like to make a professional record. So that's option number one. You can absolutely go to Manel, ask him how he would walk you through his lovely process and make a record with you. I swear you're going to learn a lot. Not only will you get a great result, but you'll also learn a lot. You'll see what's actually possible with your songs without making a final decision to do it yourself. You can just have that experience, have a final thing in your hand, learn a lot along the way. If you hire a remote producer for that, or a remote mixing engineer, somebody who's working with you closely from the beginning and then does the finishing touches, sort of. That's option number one. You can also hire me to mix a song, same thing. Option number two is you say, well, I already know I want to learn this myself. I already started, or I already have a home studio set up. I'm just stabbing in the dark. I'm spinning my wheels. It's frustrating. I don't really make progress. I've hit that plateau. Maybe you're at like year 5, like I was, and you still think that something's missing and you can't crack the code. In that case, go to the selfrecordingband.com/coaching and apply for a coaching spot. We start with a free first call. And we look at your situation, we build a custom plan specifically for you, and then we implement it together. And we can definitely compress a couple of years of frustration into 1 year of progress, and then, or a couple of months, or however long you need. And that's all I can say. So those are your options. Yep. But even if you just went through what we just said, and then you look into the backlog of this podcast and you just implement all the stuff in there, it's going to get you very far. But still, you're going to be in a vacuum and you won't have the personal feedback. So maybe it's time to apply.
Yeah.
Totally. All right. Thank you for listening to this. We'll see each other next week. And thank you, Manel, for being here with me, as always, and sharing your points on this list here. And I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Goodbye.